Lost amidst all the drama that unfolded in Washington on Thursday, Luigi Mangione was transferred to New York, surrounded by a phalanx of heavily armed law enforcement. The striking, almost military-looking transfer of this lone suspect is perhaps not surprising, since Mangione faces charges that include murder as an act of terrorism to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. Now, killing is bad, full stop, and I'm not suggesting the life of the man Mangione is charged with killing. United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson wasn't precious. His family is mourning just before the holidays, and he has 2 children who are now without a father, and we should all feel for them. But I think it's also fair to interrogate what message this very intentional show of force against the defendant, who wasn't resisting or presenting an immediate threat, sends to the American public. Because it's also striking that this killing could be characterized as terrorism when a killer like Dylann Roof, the mass shooter who mowed down 9 black parishioners at Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina in 2015 while they were at Bible study, and who claimed that he did it because he wanted to start a race war, was not charged with terrorism to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. When he was arrested not long after the mass shooting, Dylann Roof was not bombarded with an armada of police or treated as an imminent danger, but rather he was treated to Burger King by the police who arrested him. When you compare these 2 cases, it's sort of hard not to draw the conclusion that the message from on high, from government, which is what the police are, is that murder is different when the civilian population being intimidated are middle-class black churchgoers, and when they are wealthy corporate CEOs. The elevation of the wealthy and the powerful, and particularly the corporate elite, to special status also feels like the message being sent by congressional Republicans and their apparent new dad and boss, the world's richest billionaire, Elon Musk. And joining me now is Michelle Goldberg, New York Times columnist and MSNBC political analyst, and Dean Obeidallah, host of the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM. Thank you both for being here. And Michelle, I was so struck by that image of the Luigi Mangione arrest, because it definitely felt like a signal, right, from police authorities. They wanted it filmed. It was filmed by the Associated Press. And it was almost like they were arresting somebody from a Batman comic. This guy was unarmed. He was not a threat, but that was the show of force. Do you feel I'm overreading this sort of overall message, which, by the way, is also coming from Fox News, that it is absolutely the worst of murders in this case, unlike, let's say, the killing of Daniel Penny, the killing by Daniel Penny of a homeless man on a subway?
I was struck by the overkill for a different reason, actually. It seems to me that if you are worried about the fact that Luigi Mangione has become a folk hero to a significant number of people in this country, then the last thing you want to do is make him look like some sort of cinematic supervillain that requires this phalanx of security to transfer from one place to another, where you don't to have the mayor in attendance. There's just something, and also, frankly, to charge him with terrorism, which means that his political ideology is going to become part of this trial. It just seems like, again, if you're worried about copycat killings, this is to elevate him in this way. On the one hand, I understand they're trying to send a message and they're trying to comfort frightened CEOs. New York, I don't know if they did it or if they were just talking about it, was going to have a special hotline for corporate executives who've been threatened. I don't know that any such hotline exists for, say, journalists or politicians who've been threatened. But at the same time, I just think that the way that they're going about it is going to backfire on them.
Yeah, I mean, there's also no hotline, Dean, for people who die as a result of insurance companies denying them care, right? The hotline is you call the insurance company and they say no. And you know, it is not lost on me that New York City is Gotham. And Gotham is the heart of American capitalism. It's the seat of American finance, of Wall Street. And the way in which, including, I didn't even mention this, that Michelle points out, that the mayor needs to show up to show that, you know, you will not threaten our CEOs, right? It feels like a message, and I do see it reflected on Fox and on other right-wing media and all these podcasts that are funded by the Koch brothers type oil, big billionaires, et cetera. They're all sending the message. CEOs are precious. CEOs are precious. Don't mess with them.
Well, and certainly with Elon Musk, he's the king, the new president of the United States of America, and you've got that going on. But just an aside, Joy, it's interesting. Republicans finally found an immigrant from Africa that they like. You know, as long as you're white and wealthy, they're going to love you. And if you're not, you're from an SL country. You know, Michelle saw something different in that image, and I saw something different in that image. I can't help but think about how Donald Trump has praised the January 6th terrorists who committed a terrorist attack to end our democracy in the name of Donald Trump. And on Fox News, they are defended. In context, Donald Trump celebrates them, has his rallies in the past open with a song sung by the January 6th terrorists, which begs the question, if the gunman in this case was a Trump supporter who killed someone that the Republicans viewed as the enemy, whoever that might be, they would celebrate that person. And here's where we are in society. That's how dangerous MAGA and the politicization is of violence. To say January 6th, and Donald Trump has pledged to pardon those terrorists on day one who beat police officers to essentially to death in some cases. That's who's going to pardon on day one.
Right. I mean, and Michelle, the message is, it is very striking, you know, having Daniel Penny, who was acquitted. He was duly acquitted by a jury of his peers in New York, but he was treated to a, you know, at a very iconic football game with our military present. You know, Black Lives Matter is demonized simply for saying, please don't kill us, police. You know, that is considered demonic almost among the right. They've chose, it's not that they're against violence. It's right. Particularized violence against the kinds of elites they like.
Right. I mean, the shocking thing about this lionization of Daniel Penny, you could believe that he deserved to be acquitted, or you can, you know, give the benefit of the doubt to the jury that acquitted him. It's the idea that he deserves to be celebrated, right? I mean, what he did, even if it wasn't criminal, he ended someone's life recklessly. And the idea that they are turning him into this sort of hero speaks to the broader embrace of vigilantism in the Republican Party, which I would expect to only ramp up, not just because Donald Trump has said that he's going to pardon the January 6th insurrectionists, but because you're seeing militias say that they're eager to take part in mass deportations. There's a story today in the Denver Post about a man who followed and then attacked and tried to choke a journalist, asking, you know, where are you from? Are you even American? And then choked him and said, this is Trump's America now. And I think that, you know, there's a reason that someone like that would feel licensed to do what they're doing.
And let's talk about the expansion of this. You mentioned that Trump finally found an African that he can get down with. And I will note the number of South Africans who are very much involved in this movement is actually very telling, white South Africans.